most sordid thing ever happened in the history of man. So, but to come back to my point, I have to reconstruct the objectives. What are the objectives? In the words of one member, might is right. If you have the power, you use it to achieve your objectives. What is the objective? As you look at the histories of individual members, it can only be one thing: to acquire power, to keep power, to use power for their own purposes. Well, the causes one can only deduce at this point from the operations of these men as individuals and working together. They want to acquire power above all.
Power
Political
to do what?
power. As you look at their actions, the political power is to bring about what they call a new world order, which is a one world. But they use the Hegelian techniques, and we know enough about Hegel to know that not only does this mean the dialectic process, the creation of conflict, but it also means that individuals such as you and I, or anybody watching this program, will be cogs in the state, that we have no individual rights. Our rights for Hegel, individual rights for Hegel, come about through obedience to the state. We see it in the educational process, which we'll probably talk about later, that we have adopted what I call a Hegelian system of education, which is not to bring out your innate talents, but to prepare you to be an individual cog in the state. I would say that there is a minority within the order that does believe it. There's one thing I've learned in looking at the papers, that they're not all active. Maybe at any one time only 20% are active. Undoubtedly, the 20% that are active have this goal. If you look at Taft's great work, although as a president he hasn't accounted for very much in the literature, Taft's great work was to bring about the World Court, international law. International law in a world court will be essential in a new world order. If you take, for example, the career of Bush, Vice President Bush, when he was ambassador to the United Nations, he helped a process called Mondialization, which was a process by which an individual American city would adopt United Nations stature. In other words, it's a diminution, a dilution of U.S. sovereignty. So if you look at these individuals, Stimson is another very good example. Averell Harriman, certainly, in the way he's financed the Soviet Union, his work towards the build-up of the Soviet Union. If you look at these individuals and ask what is the common pattern is the creation of a one world.
So the basic assumption is that because they know what is best for America, the way to preserve that is to amass power to see to it that the destiny they envision comes to pass.
My assessment is they're not thinking what is best for America, they're thinking what is best for the order.
What is best for the order
first.
Is what is best for America. In their eyes. Order.
Yes, in their eyes.
What's good for us has to be good for America, so we will remold America according to
their pattern.
That's right.
Yes. If you meet these people, they think alike, they talk alike, they come up with the same ideas simultaneously, and they move simultaneously, know what they have to do.
So they're a breed.
They're a breed, exactly.
Now, Tony, what has this breed done? What are their chief accomplishments in molding domestic and foreign policy and actual events in American history since their founding at Yale?
One is they have acquired enormous political and financial power. You'll find representatives of the order in politics.
What have they done with this power? What has happened to America that would not have happened had they not been the order?
Creation of war and revolution.
Specifically, which ones? Do you have documents on that?
The third book in this series, which I'm bringing out, takes two wars and one revolution. Well, two revolutions in one war. World War II, the Bolshevik Revolution, and the rise of Hitler, which I call a revolution in Germany. We can find the order behind the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. We can find behind the rise of Hitler. We can find in the maintenance of both of these systems, the transfer of technology to both.
Since you've already proven that Wall Street is behind the Bolshevik Revolution and the rise of Hitler, now you're proving that the order is behind Wall Street.
Exactly.
Now, who's the key figure in the order or figures that mold Wall Street?
In order of dominance, Averell Harriman, partner in Brown Brothers Harriman. Stanley of Morgan Stanley. It used to be J.P. Morgan, then it became Morgan Stanley. Those two are the key.
Now, what did the order want to accomplish in the Bolshevik Revolution?
You create opposing forces which you place in conflict. Out of conflict, you've got profit, you've got political power, and you can direct history. And if you look at the writings, for example, of the Trilateral Commission, they talk openly in the Trilateral Commission about managing conflict, not solving conflicts, but managing conflicts. Conflict management. That's the cry.
So they got the profit, the power, and the management. Mm-hmm. Where do they want to steer history through the Bolshevik Revolution?
They wanted to set up, and they did, two opposing forces. Out of that came World War II. There were logical steps in the process. They used the same bank, Guarantee Trust Company, as the conduit for the financing of Hitler, and also as a conduit for financing, and also the early days of the Russian Revolution. In fact, in Russia, Soviet Russia in 1923, a vice president of Guarantee Trust Company was the foreign director of the Roscom Bank, which was the first Soviet overseas bank that was set up. They were that close in those days. You'll get a very close relationship between the early Hitler days and members of the Order, which is in the third book. I think the Order has been at war with the United States in general since 1833. There's no question about that when you look at their individual actions.
And that is because if the flower of the United States, the flower of freedom, was to become what its potential was, their very elite positions would not have a stronghold.
Exactly.
The greatest single threat to this breed that has antedated Christ is the nation that has itself founded upon a constitution that absolutely guarantees the rise of the individual.
This is one of the problems. They cannot live with the Bill of Rights. In fact, this is why when Archibald MacLeish, a member of the Order, wrote the Constitution for UNESCO, it was built into there that UNESCO would gradually try to erode press freedoms. In the Trilateral Commission, you'll find the same criticism: too much freedom of the press. There's just too much freedom for these people. They can't live with the Constitution. They tried to change the Constitution through the Fund for the Republic down here in Santa Barbara. They've not been successful yet, but they realize that there are roadblocks they've got to overcome to achieve what they want.
The most unfortunate thing to me is that when the people have coming at them from all directions this momentum of the Order, they turn and espouse the Order, or they let these people, or have in the past, become their idols, accept that they are an elite, accept that fact that they are superior, accept the projection from them to the people that they're superior. And today you will find people agreeing with the limitation of freedom in various sectors of this country for various purposes.
That's a very unfortunate part of our society, that too many people are willing to abandon freedom for security, or what they see as security. You can get security in a Siberian gulag, but you can get freedom in Hitler's concentration camp. But too many people are willing to give up freedom for security. Too many people are willing to look at these people as miniature gods. And because they have achieved power, don't ask how did they get power or what they're going to do with the power, but just the fact that they have power makes them a god, and therefore they worship them. This to me is unbelievable. People, I put in one of my books, we've got 20, 30 million degree holders in the United States. People who've earned a college degree, but they don't question the statements which are made by these people.
Well, it's an amazing thing that educated people can accept that the interference with private property rights, or with the press, or public assembly, or religion, free speech, the interference with that can somehow be necessary to the continuity of the republic, or the security of the nation.
It's ridiculous. I can't answer for these people. All I hope is that they will examine their own consciences and their own mind.
Well, Tony, I think that in conclusion, it's very important that we understand how you develop in your third book, which is about to come out, the development of conflict to produce war or peace that they're choosing, and how that has worked, let's say, in Vietnam or in the situations that are occurring today in the Middle East where there is great conflict. How is the order managing the conflict we see on the globe today?
Well, it's, as I mentioned before, basically it is using the Hegelian dialectic. You establish one side, then you establish the other side, then you bring them into conflict, then you manage that conflict. So you establish Soviet Union, you establish Hitler, you bring them into conflict, World War II. By managing the conflict, you can control the next decade or so. And as I mentioned, we built up the Soviet Union. We're building up their China today, communist China. We're even going to send them military technology. So by 1990, 2000, we've established the two sides. We bring them into conflict.
Now tell me, how is the order then managing the conflict in the Middle East? It's hard to believe that the Arabs or the Iranians or the Iraqis are actually under anyone's control except their own.
I can't fully answer that today. And many of these questions you can only answer maybe 10 years later, when you can look at it in perspective. For example, I can look at Pearl Harbor today and see quite clearly a much different picture on Pearl Harbor than was put out in 1941. I can't look at the Middle East today and make too much sense, except you've obviously got two sides. You've got the Hegelian dialectic at work. You've got conflict being created, conflict being managed. The Marines go in, the Marines go out. Today, the Iraq is attacking the Iranian oil bases. You've got the deliberate two sides in these conflicts, the deliberate creation of conflict and the management of conflict.
Put it this way, is Castro in Cuba because the order wants him there?
Could I rephrase the question? Is Marxist Angola remaining a Marxist Angola because the order wants him? The answer there is yes. Because I know in Angola, the Gulf Oil Company is the biggest supplier of foreign exchange to Marxist Angola. Pull Gulf Oil out of there, there's no more Marxist Angola. I can't answer as clearly for Cuba.
So Gulf Oil wants Marxism?
Oh yes, it wants, undoubtedly.
And Marxism supports Gulf Oil?
Oh yes, in fact Cabinda, the Gulf Oil installation in Angola, is defended by Cuban troops. But you see, you've got an interesting phenomena.
I think everyone should hear that one more time.
I said
Cuban troops.
Cabinda, which is the Gulf Oil installation in Angola, Marxist Angola, is defended by Cuban troops.
So here we have Cuban troops defending a capitalist monopoly.
So-called capitalist. But one of the first things you learn in this business is forget about capitalism versus communism. That is absolute nonsense. The two are, behind the scenes, are hand in hand.
It's a capitalist-communist conspiracy. One conspiracy.
Yes, but you need the so-called conflict between the two to keep people focusing. Look, keep you looking over there. Capitalism versus communism. That makes a nice little picture. You get books on it and films on it. Capitalism versus communism. That's not where the action is. The action is over here.